Welcome, Jeff Manchester, Manchester Music. It's been a while. It's been a minute since I've done a video. I've just been super busy. A lot of stuff has been released during that time. The biggest one, the one that people keep asking me about, is the Hans Zimmer strings from Spatfire. A lot of people have been talking about that library. Daniel James just did like a 18-hour, no, it was like 5-hour Twitch session on it. It's on YouTube now. My voice is probably not going to add any more scintillating discussion about that library, so I'm probably not going to talk about it. But if someone really wants me to spend $1,000 on another Spitfire strings library, PayPal me or something like that, maybe we'll talk. But today I want to return to form a little bit with this channel and talk about a plugin. I used to do Let's Plug videos, plugin based stuff, because I couldn't afford sample libraries. So we're talking about a plugin today, and this one's kind of cool. It's from GULLFOSS. I have the trial now. How many days left do I have? This is just to show you that they didn't send this to me so I can talk about it. 12 days, 7 hours left. It's like $99. It only works with Macs for now. And what it is an adaptive EQ for either at an insert level or a master bus level. What it's meant to do is very carefully adapt to the incoming signal and push down, clarify, boost, brighten, darken certain elements of the mix. What makes it different and what gives it its kind of competitive advantage is the fact that it's doing a lot of math very quickly all the time on the incoming signal, constantly adapting to it. Some people are familiar with spectral shaping, which is where you have an action region that you throw around the mix, a band that you sort of go, here I want it to go from 7K to 13K. And within that band is maybe a 32 or 64 mL spaced EQ band that is gently adapting and pushing resonances down using some very gentle low ratio compression, something like that. This is happening, I think, 100 times a second or something. It's evaluating the signal and pushing down or again brightening up elements of the mix as you dictate with these parameters here. So let's just get into it. I think this was released or debuted at NAMM or something. I didn't go, but now that I can catch my breath and do a video, I feel like it's perfect because there's no NAMM or craziness or whatever. I can just sit here and do a video about this. So I placed this on my master bus, my stereo out. I only have, just for transparency, a limiter, 2 limiters really, and they're not imparting, as far as I know, any coloration or characteristics. This isn't compression. This is not some UAD emulation limiter. These are just straight out of the box digital limiters from Logic/Apple. So just to show you that there's no funny business. All the coloration, all the tonal balance stuff was happening on an individual track level. I'm not one to do mix bus processing and have compressors and equalizers and tape machines on the master bus. So very neutral here. So let's get into the sample. Let me play a little bit for you so you can hear it. I've placed my loop, my cycle region or whatever the heck it's called in Logic, at the very end here just because a lot of frequencies are represented here and I want to use this in a mastering context. So don't really want to use it on an individual track level. So let's go over some of these parameters, recover and tame. So as far as I understand it, recover, it's set to 0% now. It only has positive values. Some of these guys have negative and positive values, so we can only go up with tame and recover. What recover is going to do is it's going to take into account anything that might be masked and push those things out of the way and recover that which has been masked. Tame is going to take a look at what's happening and what's masking what and just bring down some of those things that are masking other things. So it's less about revealing stuff and more about just good housekeeping and making sure that things that are dominating in the mix are coming down a little bit. So depending on what you want to do, if you want to unmask things, you go for the recover knob. If you want to tame things, knob, parameter, potentiometer, whatever, you would push things down with the tame knob. Both impart a certain sonic characteristic and result that is distinct from one another, which is really cool. Let's start with recover. I'm going to play the sample, bring recover up, and you'll see and hear what it's going to do. Let's have a look and a listen. Here's a little bypass button, so you'll see me press this so that we go before and after, unprocessed and processed. before. So, mind you, I'm using very extreme settings here. Oh, it goes all the way to 200. I'm using very extreme settings. And I usually, when I'm playing with this tool with GULLFOSS, it usually stays around like minus 50. 50 and below is what I'm usually setting my parameters at. But for exaggeration's sake, let's go all the way up to, 170 before and after. Before. So this is even more extreme. The reason I'm doing this is I'm just trying to show you what's happening. It's decided that for whatever reason, and it's too bad there's no frequency readout here and that I can just drag my mouse around, my cursor around, and we get some information about where we are frequency-wise, although I can do a pretty good job with my eyeballs. It's saying that, things are being masked and we want to recover them and brighten them, especially around this region here at what looks to be, I'd say maybe 17K or something like that. So we see that shoot up here in the EQ. But to me, it almost comes up and sounds like a bit of a tape machine, like we're hearing some hiss there. So I've found for this mix anyway, could differ depending on what you're working on, the program material. For me, the Tame does a better job at giving me a result that I'm happy with. So as I understand it, Tame is going to control that which is dominating and masking other things instead of uncovering stuff and brightening it up and revealing it, which is what Recover would be doing. So watch what happens when I increase the Tame knob here. I find that I get a really nice pleasant top end. Some of the mid-range is less boxy, but it's not so bright such that it sounds kind of overwhelming and extremely bright, which is what I was kind of getting with the Recover in that 17K region. So let me bring that up as I play the audio. So you can see here with this very beautiful graphic user interface, I think it's gorgeous. It's very FabFiltery. You see things are being pushed down, right? We're suppressing things, we're attenuating things. Whereas when we use the Recover and that comes up, we see things, at least to my eyes, things are peeking and poking out, and we're stretching things and revealing things. So even the way that the I guess the spectrogram, whatever this animation is, the way that moves is telling us, hey, we're taming stuff or we're recovering stuff, which is kind of cool. So to my ears, when we do the before and after with Tame at 128, which is pretty liberal for me, as I was saying, usually I hover around at least 50 and below. The strings are a little bit more pronounced. I'm hearing more articulation in some of the, what do I have here? Some harp stuff. That's not really fair because I have this soloed, so it's almost like GULLFOSS is only listening to the harp and not the totality of the mix. So. So that's kind of interesting. The harp and Celeste, kind of their articulation is less. It's almost like there's some compression happening there, which is evening out the transients. So I hear less of this sort of the physicality of that playing when I have my Tame on. Before. After. Or sorry, before. Here's after. So it's cutting out a lot of that resonance right here, it would seem, somewhere maybe at around, I don't know, 1K. It's also poking down some of the other transients above that and harmonics above that, which results in a lack of kind of clarity from the harp and all the rest of it. I can hear just like a rumor of the sound and not the whole thing. So maybe we would want to use recover there instead of tame. I'm not sure. But I am hearing more articulation coming from some of the strings and I believe some of the woodwinds when I have tame down. And I'm suppressing stuff that might be masking other stuff. So the bias over here, I'm going to bring this down just a little bit. The bias is kind of cool. This will direct the horsepower, I think, of this plugin. Negative values will direct the horsepower toward taming stuff. Higher values will direct the horsepower of this plugin toward recovering stuff. So it's almost like a tilt or like even kind of a wet dry, or how intense we want, we want to be recovering or taming things. So you'll see that as I bring the bias down, we sort of accentuate the taming, and stuff that was done with taming becomes even more pronounced. So you'll see that the high end comes up even more when I bring the bias down. If I have 117 here, of course, if we have nothing in recover and it's at 0, or obviously nothing's going to happen when we go up on the bias over here. So negative values affect the tame, higher affect the recover. So let's bring it down, and you'll see what I mean, hopefully. So obviously I'm going 100% wet here with the bias, and we're becoming just, all the taming stuff is being further accentuated. And I'm losing some of the character of some of the instruments in there, even though to our ears it might sound kind of better and more delightful because it's brighter and it's like we've taken a blanket off the speaker or something. That's not really what I intended for this mix when I did it, so I want to bring the bias, back it off a little bit. I find this before and after is pretty sensible and a good representation of what this guy can do. Let's do some before and afters. I brought my tame settings down a little bit and the bias settings up. So doing a bit more with less, so to speak. Here's before. So I think that's kind of cool. Brighten and darken, or brighten rather. This will brighten things up, or negative values will darken things up a little bit. So depending on how far you've gone with your recover, tame, and all that stuff, you might want to use this accordingly. Let's go for some extremes just so you can hear what this guy is doing. I'm going to go all the way up on brighten and then all the way down. So obviously that's a little exaggerated, but I think you can hear that it is brightening and dampening things depending on the values that we set, positive or negative. The reason I'm not doing a bypass is because the bypass will bypass the totality of my signal chain of my tame and bias, so it's not going to be a very good representation of the brighten parameter. And as far as I know, you can't just option things so that we're only hearing the difference between the bright and unbright signal and do it. You know what I mean? So you can't really just go, I only want to hear what before and after sounds like on Recover or Tame or whatever. If you have all these guys enabled, you can't just do kind of turn this module on and go before and after with it. So that's why I was doing some big bright and darkening stuff there. So option, boom, brings everything back to their default. Option click. I would say alt click, but this is not PC enabled. So boost is really cool. Boost is, the people who've made this, or the guy that made this, has taken into account that our ears are very sensitive at loudness changes to mid-range stuff. That's why, when you hear like a car alarm or like a smoke alarm, all that stuff, all the sounds that are outputted from those things are, they're around like 1K or like 2K or 7K, because our ears are super sensitive to that. So as we bring the loudness up, and as the loudness of this processing has come up, what it's going to do if you bring this up is it's going to emphasize some of the low end information, because bass is one of those things where we crank that and our ears just don't perceive bass as being very loud, no matter how well. You can get to certain points where if it's too loud, you'll notice it's very loud. But in the frequency spectrum, even if we have bass very well represented, it's still not really as loud as information in the mid-range. So if any processing has come up and resulted in a loudness change with these modules, Boost is going to come in and sort of represent a more tonally balanced low end. So as I bring Boost up, you'll see on the you'll see on the EQ graph here, you'll see the little low end come up a little bit. And I think it works conversely if I go to negative values, but have a listen. Obviously too much. So let's put the boost at something kind of sensible and do some before and afters. So maybe I'll leave it at like 6. Actually, a better thing to do would be to go, option, return it to its default. Here's before. And now we'll bring it to 6. So those lows come up in a really sort of elegant way, I find anyway. So again, it's taking into account how our human ears perceive frequencies at different loudness changes and going, all right, I see we're a little bit louder now. The mid-range is probably going to be a little bit more pronounced. Let's dip the mid-range, bring the low end up a little bit, which is kind of cool, which is, by the way, how LUFS works and why we came up with LUFS instead of, DBFS and all the rest of it. It was a loudness scale that would take into account our ear sensitivities towards certain frequencies. So that's kind of, I think, the goal there. One of the things we can do is restrict exactly what is being processed by GULLFOSS by going over to these bands here and just moving them around and saying, we only want what's in here to be affected by GULLFOSS, which is kind of cool. So if you're trying to tame or accentuate something, but only in a very specific band, we're going to do that there. So how do I feel about this plugin? The thing that I like about it the most is that it is very, it feels kind of like a return to, like desk EQ or something, where we're just going to twist a knob and see where it goes. It's not about looking for a preset or whatever. It's just about, let's bring this up and see if Recover makes it sound better, or let's bring Tame down and see if that, or Tame up and see if that helps. Or maybe I'm not going to use anything. I'm just going to use the Brighten thing or the Boost thing. So I like the way, like the user experience with this, where we're sort of, I'm very curious and I kind of want to dive in and bring these meters up and down. It's very simple, very easy to use. Like there's this Omni Sheps thing that came out from Waves, and it's just like, it looks like it's like 6 or 7 bricks, like compression, EQ, and all the rest of it. I know they're different products, I get that, but it just looked like you're looking at like the genitals of like a space robot, or like all these knobs. It was just insane. This is super clean, easy to use, and it also represents the kind of forward thinking that we're seeing from a lot of companies now, where it's not about emulating gear, it's about it's about going, what can we do with technology? In this case, we can analyze something with super smart math, have it look at the signal and tell us and give us certain information. Then we can allow the user to either refine or boost or accentuate or whatever, dampen elements of the mix. So this is not an 1176. This is not, this is super cool new tech that is very smart and is able to quantify, basic input gain and frequency structure and give us, some cool effects and results. So it's a very forward-thinking, like very 21st century plugin, which I like. The thing I have a bit of a hard time with is the fact that I don't know what GULLFOSS is doing. I don't know, and I've read the manual. It's not really clear to me what's happening here. It's a bit of a black box with its processing, and you just kind of have to trust that GULLFOSS is acting on behalf of you and your mix. Like, you just have to trust that it's giving you the best mix possible. I've read some reviews where they talk about how GULLFOSS, I don't know if they mentioned this in the documentation, but GULLFOSS has golden ears, so you can trust it. Golden ear, you can hear everything really well, even better than you, and blah blah blah. So you just have to kind of surrender to the machine and go, all right, I guess it's doing what it's doing and it's going to sound better. This plugin, I think, is one of those more than ever where you have to listen really carefully before you start tweaking stuff. And just because it sounds great in the moment, have it there and then maybe go away and come back and listen to it. And if it still sounds good to you and it's still working, then go with those results. But this is the opposite, I think, of how I think people are going to twist some parameters and go, oh, that sounds a lot better, and then just print the mix. No. Really use your ears, see what your intention was at the beginning. With this mix, GULLFOSS is doing some pretty cool things. I would argue that, very limited, careful settings on the GULLFOSS with this mix will get me to a better sounding result than what I had from the beginning. But this plugin reminds me a lot of the Clariphonic from Cush, in that, you twist a couple knobs, very easy to use. Same thing with GULLFOSS. Twist a few knobs and it would sound a lot better because it was a lot clearer and more top heavy. But I would bring that top heavy master to another room and play it for my friends and be like, oh my God, it's so piercingly bright. This is crazy. Why did I think this was a good idea? And in the manual, the Cush manual, they write for the Clariphonic, like, if you love a setting and you've twisted your potentiometers such that you got that bright result, bring them back by 50%. Bring them back, dial them back a little bit. That's where you need them to be, because trust me, after a while, it will sound way too harsh and way too bright, which is kind of interesting because the GULLFOSS is designed to do the opposite of that. It's designed to take a look and listen to what is too bright or too accentuated and then carefully dip things down. But there is a big brighten knob thing here, parameter here, and the recover obviously brought up a lot of high end here. So be aware of how sensitive our ears are to that stuff. And just because things are a little bit more clear from maybe 1 or 2K upward in the frequency range doesn't necessarily make for a better mix or whatever. It just means it's going to be a little bit brighter and maybe a touch louder. And the other thing is, we're naturally sort of inclined to think that stuff that sounds louder sounds better. Ian Shepard, a mastering engineer, a good friend of mine, he had this test where he had 2 masters, and he said, which one do you like more? Which one sounds better to you? And it's kind of a blind test or whatever. The only difference between Master 1 and Master 2 is that Master 2 was 1 dB louder. That's it. And people all picked Master 2. And the only difference, not an EQ, not a compression thing, it was just 1 dB higher. Not everyone, but most people chose Master number 2. And when they were told the only difference is a little bit louder, that's pretty revealing. So use your ears, use your intuition, but I think as a forward-thinking 21st century plugin, the way that this guy can do a lot of math, it's really smart about it, I think is really forward-thinking and really cool. I don't think the world needs another 1176 clone or another LA2A. I think we need more stuff like this, which helps get you to a noticeably different result very quickly. But I do wish that it was less of a black box, that it was more forthcoming with exactly what it was doing and how it was doing it, because I find it's a little uneasy putting a lot of trust in this. And I can't just go in with my mouse and bring things down like a fab filter or neutron or something like that. I turn these parameters up, they stay there, and that's where they stay, and I have to go, okay, this is a great result. So that's something that I think people need to be aware of. But GULLFOSS, if you're listening, if you're watching this video, great job. Awesome. I think I'm probably going to pick this up. So anyway, take care. Thanks for watching. Hopefully this is a little bit different for the channel. I know it's been a month since I've done a video. Yeah, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.